I'm Liz Faublas, and this is Currents. The Supreme Court makes a landmark decision for religious organizations. I'll talk with the lead attorney. Plus, the story of a boy who met Jesus.
The Boy Who Met Jesus. It's a story about Segetasha, a young boy from Rwanda who had apparitions from Jesus and Mary.
And a powerful story of survival and forgiveness.
The government blocked all the borders and they started to kill people one by one.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us. Well, the Supreme Court has issued a unanimous ruling in a case involving a Lutheran school and an employee who was fired from that school. The worker, a woman who worked as a religious teacher, says she was not allowed back at the school after taking a leave of absence for a sleep disorder. Now, the woman claims the schools violated the Americans with Disabilities Act. The High Court ruled last week that religious employees of a church cannot sue for employment discrimination, acknowledging a so-called ministerial exception to anti-discrimination laws. To talk more about this, I'm joined on the phone by Mark Rienzi. He is a professor of constitutional law at the Catholic University of America. Mr. Rienzi is also an attorney with the nonprofit Becket Fund for Religious Liberty, which represented the church in court. The Hosanna Tabor versus EEOC Act. Mark, thank you for joining us to talk about this. There is a lot to cover in a short period of time. Thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure.
I want our viewers first to understand what we mean by ministerial exception.
The ministerial exception basically means that the government has no ability to order a church to either hire a person or to take back a person to be in a position of either preaching or teaching the faith. The person in this case she was a teacher. She was also a minister of the church. And what the court agreed on is that the government has no ability and no power to order a church to have a certain person as their minister, as the preacher or teacher of the faith.
And why is this ministerial exception so important?
It's important for the bedrock principle that there are certain things the government needs to stay out of, and one of them is religion. Anybody who believes in the separation of church and state, I think, ought to be in favor of the idea that government bureaucrats at the EEOC or government judges can't order a religious group that this is the person you must listen to on Saturday or Sunday morning. This is the person who must teach your children religion wherever they get taught religion. That's simply something the government has no power to do. And again, all 9 justices of the Supreme Court agreed with that, which is a pretty rare thing these days.
And Mark, I want to get a little deeper into this issue with you. This landmark decision underscores the key issue of religious freedom, as you mentioned, especially as it relates to the Constitution. Now, specifically, the First Amendment is what we're talking about, which loosely translated defends the separation between church and state. Now, some see this as the Obama administration challenging constitutional law as well as religious freedom. Is that partly how it was viewed by you and your colleagues?
Not only by us, but also, I think, by the Supreme Court, including justices that this president put on that court. The administration took a very aggressive position at the Supreme Court. They said that the First Amendment doesn't give religious groups any greater ability to choose their leaders than a labor union or a social club would have. They basically said even though the First Amendment talks about religion, religion doesn't get any special treatment. What the Supreme Court said was that was an extreme position. They said it was an extreme position. They said it was remarkable. They said it was untenable. There's simply no basis for saying that the Constitution doesn't treat religion differently. It does. That's part of the First Amendment, and the court unanimously rejected the Obama administration's effort to read that out of the First Amendment.
Now, with the High Court ruling in your favor, opponents now raising the question of accountability, arguing that churches may take advantage of this so-called protected right.
I don't think there's any real danger of that. Most of the courts in the country had already recognized the ministerial exception, so in some sense this is not very different from where most of the courts were a week or 2 weeks ago. All this decision says is that there's a narrow group of employees, those people whose job it is to teach or preach the faith, that the government simply has no ability to judge the reasons for hiring and firing those people. So it's a very narrow rule. The ADA still applies to the great majority of cases out there, and it's really just as strong as it ever was.
And Mark, I understand that there was some heated debate between Supreme Court justices and the government's EEOC attorneys, that legal team not convinced that the First Amendment doctrine protects churches from government's ordering who they should hire as pastors or priests. So this case wasn't just about religious employees. How far does the exception go?
That's one of the questions that I think the case leaves open. So what I think is clear after the case is that it certainly covers what rabbi the synagogue hires or what priest the bishop hires or the church hires, and it certainly covers people whose job includes teaching the faith to children. The court didn't establish any clear test, though, to say where exactly it ends, so I think that's something that will be decided in cases after this one. But what we know for sure is that it at least covers someone who's got a position like Perich's, which is someone who teaches in a school and part of the job is to teach the religious faith to children. That's an employee who the court said the government simply has no business ordering a church who to hire and who to fire.
Mark, does it concern you that this case even had to go to the high court? An overwhelming majority of lower federal courts and state courts in the United States, they'd already upheld the decision well before the Supreme Court co-signed it.
It didn't concern me that the case got to the Supreme Court. I think there was some confusion in the lower courts, so there was a reason for them to take it. I think what was most concerning was the position that the administration took, where they basically said religious freedom is this very, very narrow thing. It doesn't apply in most situations, and it doesn't give religion any different rights. And what I think is very heartening is the fact that even someone like Justice Kagan, who very recently was President Obama's top lawyer at the Supreme Court, and who, of course, he put on the Supreme Court, said that was an amazing position for the administration to take, and the court unanimously said they were exactly wrong on it.
Really quickly, Mark, is this a slight against the Americans with Disabilities Act?
I don't think it is. Again, it's really no different from the way the ADA was applied 2 weeks ago. What it says is that the government can't be in the business of making these decisions about a limited class of people whose job it is to teach and preach religion. That's all it says. I think the ADA basically does all the things it did 2 weeks ago, it does tomorrow. All this does is say that in certain positions, the government can't order a religion to take someone back to teach religion. That's just beyond the power of the government to do.
All right. Thank you very much, Mark Rienzi. We do thank you very much for joining us. Very interesting stuff.
It's my pleasure.
And stay tuned. There is more currents ahead. An abortion case in Texas could have wide-ranging implications. We'll have that story and the rest of the day's headlines next. Welcome back to Currents. I'm Liz Faublas. Coming up later, she witnessed genocide up close and lived to tell about it. A Rwandan woman shares her powerful witness. But first, let's have a look at the day's headlines. It appears to be a reversal of sorts in an abortion case in Texas. A 14-year-old pregnant girl is suing to have her baby against her family's wishes. According to reports, the girl, who is about 2 months along, says her grandmother and 2 cousins physically and verbally attacked her. Greg Terra, the president of the Texas Center for Defense of Life, is part of the team representing the girl. He says his client has the same rights as anyone else who is pregnant.
This case is about a woman's or girl's, teenager's fundamental right to choose, and the Roe v. Wade decision goes both ways. So in the state of Texas, a teenage girl can get a judicial bypass without parental consent or notification. This case is about the fact that that goes both ways. So if the teenage girl wants to carry the child to term, she has a fundamental constitutional right to do that.
And now a judge will decide tomorrow whether to continue a temporary restraining order against the girl's family. From Massachusetts, the state's appeals court has overturned a ruling ordering a pregnant woman with schizophrenia to have an abortion. Earlier this month, a judge ruled the woman was incompetent and ordered her to abort the baby and be sterilized. The appeals court overturned that, saying the woman, a Catholic, had clearly stated her opposition to abortion. The court also ruled that sterilization order appeared to come out of thin air. Meanwhile, a group of congressmen have come out in support of an Ohio law to regulate the so-called morning after abortion pill. The law would prohibit abortion providers from recommending the pill for uses other than those prescribed by the Food and Drug Administration. Planned Parenthood argues the law is too vague, but supporters of the measure point to the fact that 8 women have died after misusing the drug. Bishops in Washington state are speaking out against a proposal there to legalize same-sex marriage. In a statement, the bishops say the current definition of marriage does not depend on anyone's religious beliefs. They cite Washington state's current law, which defines marriage as a civil contract between a male and a female. The bishops say changing that law would add to the forces already undermining family life today. They urge people to contact state representatives to ask them to uphold uphold the current definition of marriage. Well, a Catholic chaplain on board the Costa Concordia cruise ship sprang into action after learning that the ship was sinking. Father Raffaella Malena says he had two concerns: saving the valuables the crew gave him and saving the Eucharist. The UK newspaper, the Catholic Herald, reports that after hearing an explosion, the 70-year-old priest began praying. He says that once he heard the abandoned ship alarm, he began consuming the consecrated hosts. Malena says that contrary to initial reports, the ship's crew made personal sacrifices to make sure passengers were safe. And a parish in Minnesota continues to pray for a couple on board the cruise ship. CNN's Ted Rollins has that story.
Friends say Jerry and Barb Heil were excited about their 16-day Italian vacation, which included a cruise and a visit to the Vatican.
They've been saving up for this both in time and energy and money to take this trip. This is one of their once-in-a-lifetime trips, and they were pretty excited about it.
Devout Catholics, the Heils are at church nearly every day, attending Mass and volunteering. Jerry, who's retired from the Minnesota Department of Agriculture, teaches religious education. The Heils were among the group of 29 initially reported missing from the cruise ship disaster in Italy.
It's just so hard to take and put it into words, the emptiness that so many of us feel.
The Heils have 4 grown children. The family launched this webpage as a way to update the public with new information as they desperately wait word on their parents.
My mom never traveled much until after my dad retired, so they've been going a lot of places, and I was really happy for them because they deserve to go on this awesome trip that they had planned.
At the church, a 24-hour prayer vigil of hope has been established.
Hope is a fascinating term. So we're praying for them, knowing that we can't control the situation. Of course we want them to come out fine, as we would everybody.
Jerry is 69 years old, Barb is 70 years old. The facts of this case clearly don't lend themselves to a lot of optimism. However, the family and the folks here at the church say they are still hopeful.
And that report from CNN's Ted Rollins. Turning now to the campaign trail. A prominent Catholic from Massachusetts is touting Mitt Romney's pro-life bona fides. The Romney campaign released this video featuring former U.S. Ambassador to the Vatican, Mary Ann Glendon.
It struck me as very unfortunate that Mitt Romney has been criticized by some people for coming to a pro-life position on the basis of information. That's what the pro-life movement is all about. Governor Romney showed great political courage and expended much of his political capital in supporting pro-life measures when he was here in Massachusetts.
Glendon cites Romney's vetoing measures to expand embryonic stem cell research and the morning after pill and his support for abstinence education. Glendon says Romney was a great pro-life governor and will be a great pro-life president. Meanwhile, a group of more than 150 conservative and Christian leaders have announced they're endorsing Rick Santorum for president. The group, which gathered in Texas this past weekend, overwhelmingly supported Santorum. The former Pennsylvania senator is one of 2 Catholics in the race for the GOP nomination. He received almost 75% support from those gathered. Former House Speaker Newt Gingrich, the other Catholic in the race, came in second with just over 25%. Well, from Scotland, 2 Catholic midwives are suing the country's largest health board, claiming they were forced to participate in abortions. According to the BBC, the midwives say they were forced to supervise staff taking part in abortions, a violation of their conscience rights. The health board says that conscience protections do not protect the midwives from performing those duties. The women cite their Catholic faith in their objection to taking part in abortions. Police in Nigeria say a man believed to be the mastermind behind the bombing of Catholic Church on Christmas Day was arrested, but escaped custody. The Christmas bombing killed 38 people. The Islamist group Boko Haram claimed responsibility for the attack. Well, Catholic leaders in Pakistan have rejected government claims about the demolition of church property. Authorities say the property was razed in order to remove a land grabber. Bishops say those claims are false and that they were kept in the dark about the situation. Among the buildings demolished, a school and a home for the elderly. The Vatican's highest-ranking Chinese official is calling on the government in his homeland to release 9 bishops and priests from custody. The Archbishop, who is secretary of the Congregation for the Evangelization of Peoples, says people need to pray for the bishops and priests. He tells Asia News that people also need to appeal to those holding the clergy. 8 of those under arrest are members of an underground Chinese church in communion with the Vatican, but not approved by the Chinese government. And an Italian newspaper reports the Breakaway Society of St. Pius X has issued another response to the Vatican. The two sides have been in talks aimed at bringing the traditionalist, that is, group back into the Catholic Church. The society was excommunicated in the late 1980s after their leader ordained bishops without the Vatican's approval. Well, stay tuned. There's more currents ahead. Coming up, some people are calling it the greatest story never told. We'll hear all about it.
He never knew nothing about God, completely blank. I mean, the questions he just asked Jesus.
Welcome back. What would you do if you came face to face with Jesus? Many people believe that's exactly what happened to a boy in Rwanda. We had a chance to hear more about that from an author with a pretty amazing story of her own. She's written about this young boy and was in Manhattan last week to share that story.
So it is good to be here and to share my story, to share this book, because I have dreamed about this for such a long time.
This evening we have Immaculée, who is speaking about her new book, The Boy Who Met Jesus. It's a story about Segatasha, a young boy from Rwanda who had apparitions from Jesus and Mary.
Because this boy was a pagan. He never knew nothing about God, completely blank. I mean, the questions he just asked Jesus. That is the most beautiful thing, really. And the answers he gets back. He would ask him things like, so what happened? You tell me to love my enemies, but you don't seem to love Satan, and he's your enemy. So Jesus said, I don't hate Satan, Satan hates me. But as you know, the boy is not yet approved by the Vatican.
Kibeho is a very small village in Africa, in Rwanda, where Our Lady appeared to some children. It was in the early 80s, 11 years before the genocide. It's the only Marian apparitions in Africa that are recognized by the Vatican. Segatasha, his apparitions began a few months after the 3 young girls. The genocide that happened kind of, I think, delayed a lot of the research and the process for investigation and approval.
And the genocide happened. As you have read it, it took almost everything in my life I cherished. I stayed in the bathroom for 3 months with other 7 women. Without talking, without moving. When we came out, everyone in our families we left behind was killed. He died during the genocide. But I would guess, I mean, one thing I got from Kibeho and from the boy, God loves all of us.
The fact that, yes, he did die broke my heart, but he honored God.
This story really did touch my heart, and I love the story. I believe it myself. And the messages are, I've not read anything that's contradicted anything that I already believe. It's just reconfirmed it.
I do fall into doubt. I do fall into despair, and I need to constantly be reminded, yes, this is true. Yes, there is a God. You know, yes, he loves me. Yes, he's reaching out to us through different people.
It's kind of like you hear something from within, and I think I've been feeling something from within, and it feels true to me, and it feels like something I've been needing to hear.
And stay tuned. There's more currents ahead. When we return, a Rwandan genocide survivor shares her powerful witness to forgiveness.
I thought I had a good reason to hate. You just feel like, how do you forgive somebody who's killing you? I started to pray this prayer, and everything changed.
Finally tonight, we just heard from the author of a book about a Rwandan boy who claims to have met Jesus. But as it turns out, she has a pretty amazing story of her own. She survived the Rwandan genocide, and what she did in the aftermath of that horror is nothing short of amazing. We had a chance to catch up with her last year when she spoke at Immaculate Heart of Mary Church in Kensington.
If we have done what our Lady have told us to do, to care for one another, we could have avoided so much pain in the whole country.
Immaculée is a Rwanda genocide survivor, and it is what's interesting about her story is that it was through prayer and through that experience she was able to forgive those who did terrible things to her family, to her, and to the people of her country.
What happened was I was a student in college and I went home for Easter holiday and a genocide started. The government blocked all the borders and they started to kill people one by one. My parents asked me to go to hide. I was one girl among 3 boys, so everyone wanted me to be safe. And I went to a neighbor who was from the other tribe that was more loved but who was a good man. They knew he wouldn't kill. So this man put me to sleep in a bathroom 3 by 4 feet. We thought it was just going to be maybe a day and then it would be fine. We spent in that bathroom 3 months. When we came out after 3 months, everybody was killed. 1 million people was killed in a period of 3 months. A huge disaster. And my parents were killed, my 2 brothers, my grandpa, my grandma. It was such a disaster. I thought God was on my side, and actually he wanted me to be a strong woman who later can become a soldier and kill people who killed my family. And I thought that was great. But the prayers I could say from my heart was, kill them, send them to hell. I was so angry. I was so angry, I thought if only I came out, I was going to be killed like them. And yet I was praying. Prayer brought me to forgive because I was on fire. I was so hateful. And I thought I had a good reason to hate. You just feel like, how do you forgive somebody who's killing you? I started to pray this prayer and everything changed.
When she was praying the Lord's Prayer in terms of, forgiving those who have trespassed against us, that enabled her to realize this is the Lord's Prayer. These are not man-made words. These are the words that Jesus himself, the Lord Jesus, gave to us.
This is a rosary my father gave me when we were separating. So it meant a lot. And I swear, I always tell people, those who can say it, do it. If you say it from your heart, everything will change. If you are conflicted between being kind and being right, always choose to be kind. And that, I leave it with you. Thank you so much again for everything.
I think it's very hard to forgive, but I do think that after listening to her, that she certainly brought peace into my heart, and I'm sure into everyone that was in the audience tonight.
It was good to hear her tonight and to be reminded again of what she went through and how she has come through it. She has influenced me and how I will try to forgive.
We are on the journey of faith. We are living our faith, but we're not perfect in our faith. And no one, because you belong to religion, is perfect. But we have the tools, and anyone can do it. If you take it seriously, you will get there. Anyone can forgive.
Quite a powerful story. Well, that is all for this edition of Currents. Be sure to visit us online at currentsny.net. You can also connect with us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. And if you have a question, comment, or story idea, email us, please. The address is dropusaline@currentsny.net. For all of us here at Currents, I'm Liz Faublas. Thank you for watching and have a great night.